My name is Tom Grimes, currently from Austin, Texas. I went to the Writers Workshop from 1989 to 1991. I lived in Iowa City for 3 years. I'm back today to read a Prairie Lights books for my latest book, which is my first memoir. And it's about my friendship with Frank Conroy, who's the director of the Iowa Writers Workshop for 17 years. I met Frank back in 1989. And the book happened by sort of accident, like I was supposed to write an essay, 5,000 words, about Frank's work. And very quickly it became, I was writing about Frank and me. And Frank is kind of my surrogate father, my literary father. And so the editor who read the first couple of pages said, you know, this is not the essay we want, but I think you should keep going. You might have something or a book. I was like surprised. I was like, oh, okay. So I kept going. I had no idea what I was doing, but 8 months later I had a book finished in, about 8 months. The readers for this book have been really grateful in a lot of cases. I get really lovely letters from total strangers who say, thank you for writing this book. I'm a writer, I don't feel as alone anymore. Your sense of failure and whatnot, and struggle and kind of is the same situation that I've gone through, or I find myself going through, or I worry about going through. So people really respond to that, but they also respond to the friendship that Frank and I developed, and which lasted over 16 years. And people also, interestingly, say, I didn't realize I had a mentor until I read your book, which is titled Mentor, and that was a fluke as well. That kind of came about after the book was written. But some of my ex-students would write to me and say, yeah, you were my mentor, and I was like, okay, I didn't realize it at the time, but I guess I was doing something right. We just kind of clicked. But I thought of them as friends. They were just younger, and I just answered whatever questions they had that just kind of came along. I've had people like my books in the past. I've had a lot of people dislike my books in the past, but or just not connect with them. But this, maybe because it's a memoir, like people really, and it's pretty bare. Like I guess I don't hold anything back, and I'm pretty critical of not even critical of myself, but just, my perception of myself as a failure, which is not necessarily other people's perception of me, is something I address directly. And so the bad reviews of the books, I just printed them. I didn't paraphrase them or anything. I just said, here's Publishers Weekly saying, here's the schizophrenic second novel from Grimes and whatnot. So I think people respond to that a lot, like just how honest it was. And I think that came across because I was so unprepared to write the book that I didn't know what was going to happen. So I kind of stumbled on these, revelations, recognitions, things that I didn't understand about myself 20 years ago. That I only understood while I was writing the book, or came to understand while I was writing the book. And I think that gives it its feeling of aliveness and really a direct connection with a reader. That comes through. That's what I hear from people. I write in an office at home every day. I wrote this book with earplugs in, so that as much sound as possible was just dulled out, dim. And so it was just very quiet, and it was just me and the language in my head, me and the sentences, which is, I really wanted the book compressed, and the sentences really tight and very transparent, so it was an easy read, and people could really kind of fly through the book, so that the emotional impact was a lot more intense. And that's what I hear from people. I read your book in one sitting. One guy complained that he got dehydrated because he didn't want to get up. He didn't want to put the book down. So it was just kind of funny. But so my room is my my quiet place. Then I have a place in Santa Fe that I go to every summer, and I write there quite a bit. And there's a really quiet room that looks over the mountains that I sit in and write. Yeah. Basically internal, because I direct an MFA program. So there's like always a riot going on in my head to a certain extent, because the job of being an MFA director, to a certain extent, directing a program, is like kind of being any kind of person who's in charge. You mostly fix mistakes, like it's just sort of like a crisis and you have to deal with it, and you do other things, of course, but it eats up your time and your brain in a way that just having a very formal teaching schedule does not. So, for me, the environment is like the work environment for me, but it's what goes on in my head with regard to work. What do I have to worry about today? And for writing this book, I wrote it in 8 months because I blocked out all of that stuff. I just really forced myself to do it, and I didn't want to let the book go, so I didn't let anything get in my way. And I wrote 5-6 hours a day. I mean, this was not 8 months of like an hour here, an hour there. It was long days. So I used to go from one book to the next fairly quickly, and I also had written plays earlier, and so I would finish a novel and I would write a play because the form would be so different and it would be enjoyable. But a memoir is interesting. I've never written one before, didn't expect to write this one. And when I finish a novel, I kind of feel like lonely because my characters no longer exist. They're gone from my life. But now that I've finished the memoir, I don't know who I am anymore to a certain extent. The past is sealed off. I closed that door without necessarily intending to, not necessarily understanding what I was doing. But I can't see the future yet. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'm in this like really weird, like kind of limbo. It may just be that I'm recharging my batteries, or it may be that the book is about my friendship with Frank Conroy, who wrote classic memoir Stop Time. And it was 17 years between books for Frank, 67 to 85, 18 years. So I hope there's not 17 years between my book and my next one, if there is a next one. But I think as opposed to a novel, it hits you differently. Finishing a memoir, it really takes a lot out of you and saps you in a different way. And you can't just go on to the next project. Your imagination can't jump to it. And also, the idea of writing fiction to me right now seems bizarre. It seems like it's like, why would I make somebody up if I can just write what I know and think, So it's strange. So I don't know if I'm recharging my batteries or I'm completely lost. I don't feel the need anymore to just write a book because I can write a book. I know I can write a novel. I don't know, it may not be a good novel, but I know I can write a novel. But I think at this point in my life, and having written this book, I only want to write what's necessary, what's absolutely necessary to me will be the only thing that's necessary from me to a reader, that I can give to a reader, I think, for the most part. I don't want to just, it's not like, okay, on to the next project because I have time on my hands. It's really, this book became necessary for me to write after I was into it. And right now, I feel like whatever comes next has to feel something, it has to be something that I feel has to be written without regard for what happens to it in the world once it's outside of my hands. And that's how I feel about this book, Mentor. It was sort of, it can't be good or bad to me. It was necessary. So that's kind of how, I came about it. So I don't take for granted that there'll be another book, yeah. I wouldn't define it as spiritual in the going to church sense of things. There's a line in the book in Mentor that the only leap of faith that I'll take is writing sentences that connect with other people, and that's Kierkegaard's leap of faith. It's not spiritual in be in relation to God, or even me in relation to myself. I guess it's if I connect with other people as a writer and I connect with readers, then there's something spiritual about it that I just think can't really be named, but which is good. It's ineffable, which I think is what it has to be. So that's as close to defining it, I think, as I could come. Well, my psychiatrist, my first psychiatrist, said that I was a writer, because he asked me who I was. He said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm a writer." He said, "No, I didn't mean what do you do? I mean, who are you?" And I thought, what a bizarre question. I said, "I can't answer it." And he said, "That's because you're a brilliant mimic. You can make up all these voices in your head, you can get them down on the page. But when you're not writing a novel, you have no idea who you are. There is no Tom inside you." So, and I thought, well, I don't know about that. And postmodernists would say, of course there's no Tom inside you. There are like a zillion little Toms and stuff, that are surfaces. And so, what's a writer? There's a cliche, a writer writes. But I think ultimately a writer is someone who really devotes his life to writing, to literature, and to craft, and to not quitting, and just, I think you have to have that tenacity, because nobody's waiting for you to write the next story or the next book. There are more than enough books for anybody in the world to read, and you have to want to really just do it. It's almost like a compulsion, but it's also striving for beauty and meaning, and giving people, including yourself, first yourself, a reason to live, and then with luck, other people. So, connection.